What is up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health, fitness, social well-being. Here with my boy, Brendan Teets.
What's up, guys?
And this, guys, is part 2 of our series over fatigue. Guys, we have a whole lot of information to cover, so if you haven't already, make sure you watch part 1 before you watch this part. You're not going to understand anything that we're talking about here, but we're going to dive right into it. Brendan's going to let you get started going over the different types of fatigue.
Yeah, so go watch part 1. The link will be in the description. That's over on my channel. It's not on Marcellus' channel. If you don't watch it, you're not going to understand this. What we did here is we're giving you guys programming adjustments or recommendations that you can do with your actual training to alter and get out of being overly fatigued. And we're going to set up rules of thumb. But go watch that video because it talks about neural fatigue, muscular fatigue, connective tissue fatigue, and all the different rates of them. Now, we broke this down into category. We kind of listed this by volume fatigue, so things dealing with work capacity or muscular fatigue. Intensity fatigue, things dealing with your top sets, the heaviness on your back, feeling like you're underperforming on just your top sets, and then joints and aches, aches and pains, things that are just hurting while you're lifting. And now, if we do anything from one of these categories, it's going to help out all the categories. If you reduce something that's dealing with intensity-based fatigue, it's going to help out on the volume forefront too, and likewise with volume into intensity. But we did this in categories because you want to try to isolate what is happening, what is fatiguing you, and then take a step of course of action to correct that. So we're going to start with volume fatigue. The first one we want to talk about is if you reach more than 2 sessions in a row of a 5% reduction on the same training day of the week, so this is going to be 2 weeks in a row, we want to drop volume by 20%, and that means set volume. So say you have a strength-based lower body day that has squats and deads in it. For 2 weeks in a row, when you get back to that session, if you see a 5% reduction in your strength on the top end, or just by getting through the working sets, it's feeling way fucking harder, we want to just drop our set volume only by 20%. So just to give you an even round number, say someone is squatting 20 sets of squats per week, all their working squats, okay? You have 3 squat days per week, and after all your build-up sets and everything, that accumulates about 20 sets. We're just gonna shave off 20% from that, so that'd be 4 total working sets from your squats throughout the week, and that will help out hugely with volume. So you don't need a huge reduction here. 20% will actually go a long way. I think too often people get fatigued and they just chop their program in half.
Yeah.
Go ahead, you can go with the next one.
All right, guys, so picking right back off of that, the next step that we want to do is drop our tertiary day or alter the volume and intensity dramatically. Now, understand when we're talking about the tertiary day, this is based upon how Brendan and I program for our clients. So you guys know, if you watch the micro DUP programming, how we set our programs up, that there's 2 lower body days in intensity and a volume day, 2 upper body days in intensity and volume day, and that 5th training day of the week is that tertiary day. And all we're really doing on this day is trying to get a little bit of additional volume. It's usually at a fairly light percentage, like anywhere from like 60, no more than like 70%. And if you feel like you're dealing with too much fatigue, one of the best ways you can do step 1 is simply to drop that tertiary day right there, because you'll be dropping anywhere from 2 to 4 sets of squats, and then about like 3 to 4 sets of bench press if you go ahead and do that. Now, if you're somebody where you don't have that tertiary day, then altering volume and intensity dramatically kind of already goes with this first point where we're dropping the set volume by about 20%. And then the same thing as far as intensity, which we're going to get more into on this point here, but that's just a real simple way to go into the first point, which is simply to reduce overall volume.
And I think it's good to note here that if you can maintain the tertiary day, because motor learning. Yeah. So the more often we squat, the better we are at just doing the squat. So squatting 3 times a week is awesome, but only if you can recover from it.
Absolutely.
So my first step would be to take, and I think we both do this, we'll try to shave off those, that 20% set volume, maybe from a couple sets from each day. Yeah. But if that's still not working, if you're just still finding you get fatigued like hell from this day, which is really supposed to be a recovery day, then just take that day out of the training and keep the other days in volume the same as how they have been.
Because otherwise it completely defeats the whole purpose of that tertiary day anyway. If you're not recovering from it and the point of it is kind of an after recovery day, you don't need it. And the same mindset kind of goes with the next point, guys, which is simply to remove unnecessary work on the prime movers. Once again, the purpose of our accessory work, aside from just muscle imbalances, general health, stuff like that, is we're trying to get a little bit more total volume and workload on the muscle groups without having to add like 3 more sets of deadlifts, 3 more sets of squat, 3 more sets of bench press. But if we're already having issues recovering from the programming as a whole, we would like to actually try to reduce some of that fatigue by removing some of the accessory work before I take away 3-4 sets of squats.
People, they love certain accessory movements, things
Yeah.
like Romanian deadlifts or reverse hypers.
Yeah.
This often comes to mind to me with deadlifts. I'll see people do a lot of back work that is
Yeah.
really unnecessary. Their SSB, good mornings, and just things that you can take out of the equation that will allow you to actually recover from the most important work first.
Yeah.
So removing that accessory work. Now the last thing that we do often is the planned fourth week, we'll like do a second half deload. So me and Marcellus usually always do our training in 4-week training blocks. It just aligns with a month, you know, on the normal American calendar. So we like sometimes reducing the second half of that final week's volume just for like kind of a planned deload.
Yeah.
So this is something we'll do when we have a client who just seems to stir up a lot of fatigue by the end of the training block.
Yeah.
We normally just wave load. So we'll go through a training block of 4 weeks by kind of increasing volume and or intensity throughout that training block. And then we start back over the next training block a lot lighter and a lot less volume, but it'll still be higher than where we started the training block before. That's how we get that linear wave loading undulation. Now, if someone just seems to respond really poorly to that still, we'll kind of do like a planned deload that isn't a full-on deload, but what we'll do is we'll get through the first most important workouts of the week, those strength-based days, there's squats, deadlifts, and bench, and then after that on their secondary squat, bench, and deadlift days, and even their tertiary days, we'll shave off some of that volume, oftentimes by 20 to all the way as 50% for like a planned deload of that second half week, and this is something to really get them kind of fresher for the start of next block, and then with that wave load, they end up feeling really good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, so that pretty much covers our general points for volume fatigue. Going into next, intensity fatigue. Once again, keeping in mind, guys, all these go hand in hand because intensity is a part of your total workload, your total volume. But when we're talking about intensity fatigue, we really are referring more to that neural fatigue, things feeling heavy, the objective weight that we have on the bar.
Yeah, objective weight and exertion, how close we are going to failure.
Yeah, so usually, guys, when you're dealing with things like poor top sets, your top sets are feeling really heavy, or really even your back down sets are just feeling a lot heavier than what they should.
You unrack that squat bar and it's feeling fucking heavy on your back. Those are the kind of signs we're looking for.
Then in that case, what we want to do, guys, is go ahead and we want to, once again, intensity and exertion related in this instance, we want to drop the exertion, especially starting off on that secondary day. If you can get through that primary day, we want to keep the exertion a little bit higher on that day because we want the intensity to be a little bit higher on the intensity-based days. Then we want to try to drop on the secondary day first because that secondary day is supposed to be more volume-based anyway. Even as we get a little bit closer to the meet, it's always going to be more volume with that primary day. So if we can drop the RPE but still get that total workload in on the secondary day, that's great. Now, if you need to drop it on the primary day as well, that's something that you can do. We're actually doing that with me right now where I'm not going past RP7s on my primary days. Keep in mind, I'm still about 12 weeks out from my meet.
Yeah, and we're only doing that for him for one block. We're going to get him back to higher RPs on that day soon.
Yeah.
So this is really, to me, more of a secondary and tertiary day kind of thing.
Yeah.
We want to keep that exertion a little bit lower. And again, so we're squatting, say we're squatting and benching 3 times a week or something.
Yep.
That strength-based day is always going to be earlier in the week. That day, we don't want to try to change too much if we can't.
Yeah.
We still want to hit in those RP7s, 8 and 9s even, if we can. On those secondary days, though, that's not as important. So we might want to keep the RPE to a 7 just straight across the training block to help reduce some of that fatigue. That kind of brings us to the next point. No heavy back off volume, even on the intensity day. Now, this is more of a rare one, but this is something that we often have to do. This goes out to my clients like Liam or my client David out in Ireland. These guys are strong guys. I don't know why. I can fucking kill these guys with volume. I actually have David squatting and benching something like 20 plus sets, I think, on squats per week or somewhere around there after you include the build-ups. And his bench is like at 28 to 30 sets. It's something crazy. He's totally recovering from that. The second we kept trying to up his intensity and exertion as we get closer to his meet, he would just fatigue. We tried pull back on some volume, nothing really helped him. So what we really went for was reducing his heavy back off volume. So all of his back off volume, we've been keeping in that 70 to 80% range with just a top set here and there to stimulate his fitness. And even though we're keeping volume extremely high, he's recovering from it. So this is kind of a rare case situation.
Sure.
I think you have 1 or 2 clients too like this.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing you guys have to understand, guys. Like, the rules can be a little bit more hard set with volume, total workload from person to person. Intensity is very individual. People respond to intensity. Like, people like Brendan and I, surprisingly, despite like our small joints, we can take a lot of intensity. Whereas other people, I think even Derek, by comparison, doesn't handle intensity as well as what we do. And that dude's like a tank. So that's really, really individual. You want to go ahead and explain to them how we go about the biweekly RP fluctuations as well?
Yeah, okay, this is another one that's a little bit individual, but this is something more, I would say, for deadlifts.
Yeah.
So squats you can keep pretty linear. So again, we have a 4-week training block that we'll work with. We'll often start at like a RP 5 or 6 on squats for our top sets. And then maybe towards the end of the block, we're getting up to 8 or 9. So each week we just increase the exertion a little bit.
Yeah.
Deadlifts, I'll kind of go bi-weekly sometimes if the client needs this. Something we've done with Marcellus in the past. His deadlift fatigue's really hard from, not so much intensity, but because he's a conventional puller. So conventional pullers can get really beat up from pulling heavy deadlifts. And so something we did with him is we'll push his deadlift to like an RPE 8 one week and then give him a big reduction RP 5 or 6 the next. The next week again RP 8 or maybe even push it to a 9, and then week after that again a big reduction. So it's kind of going up and down a lot as where the squat is more linear. Now you could do this for the squat and bench press. I have done that a couple times. I don't know if you have.
I usually don't do it near, especially getting closer to me. That's something I want to keep in mind, guys. With these bi-weekly RP fluctuations, you can do it anytime with the deadlifts, but I found that I usually do this more as a client's getting closer to a meet, just to kind of get the fatigue low.
On deadlifts,
on the deadlifts. In the off season, I tend to push their deadlifts a little bit more in a similar fashion to the squat.
Because you can get away with it. You don't need to perform as much.
Exactly, because we have the time to recover.
And you're almost trying to induce more fatigue in the off season. Closer to meet, you're actually trying to manage fatigue. I'll say. I don't want to say pull it off, but manage it.
So after that, guys, next bullet point for intensity is simply to start the wave load at a lower exertion RP. So like Brendan said, we tend to do things in like four-week mesocycles or 4-week periods. So something that's really simple is that if by that 4th week, when they're hitting like their heavier like RP 8s, 9s, things like that, if they seem to be like hit really hard from that, my clients Santiago and Josh, I know you guys are watching this right now, you're experiencing this right now, then I'll start their next mesocycle, that week 1 of the next block, at a lower exertion. So instead of maybe starting around RP 6, I may have them start around RP 5s for their top set.
No such thing as RP 5, bro.
Oh yeah, RP 5s don't exist,
it doesn't
right?
exist,
yeah, everyone says RP
it's impossible
sub 6.
to rate.
If you can rake in RP 6, you can rake in RP 5. And all we're doing once
again,
again,
you can rate less than a 5, bro.
Easily.
If you're experienced enough.
Easily, because all we're trying to do, guys, keep in mind, exertion, that is the king when it comes to inducing fatigue.
It is.
So by simply going from something that RP6, which is already relatively low exertion, to an RP5, it's just going to be an easier way to shave off some of that intensity. And then the following week, you can go to RP6, then 7. Then by the end of that week, that block, you're ending around RP8. So you haven't induced as much fatigue as you would have over the whole mesocycle if you started on RP6.
And it's kind of like starting off with like a double break on the deadlift, especially on the deadlift. So you might go RP5 and a 6 to really just let them recover. And this is something, again, conventional pullers are really like this for. Sumo pullers can get away with a little bit more, but even those guys, they can induce a lot of fatigue. Joints, aches, and pain. I'll start this one because I'm the most broken coach there is out there. Drop some repetitive specificity, but not near a meet. But even near a meet, you can do this. But for the most part, if you're comp squatting, meaning low bar squatting or whatever your competition style squat is 3 times a week, and your aches are starting to creep through the roof, your joints feel beat up, reduce that specificity, get out of that movement pattern. Try a front squat, try a high bar squat, try a naked squat where you're not using belt and sleeves, so the objective load is reduced, but objective load is reduced, but the subjective load is actually still pretty high. I really like this for people who are injury prone. This is something I do a lot. Back in the day, I used to comp squat and comp bench all the time. Finally, after a while, my pecs and my legs and knees and everything started having enough of that. So I have to reduce that specificity a little bit. But going into a meet, I think it's important to try to do our competition lifts a little bit more frequently. Keep them to 2 to 3 times a week. That's really important. But deep off season, not as much.
Usually, guys, even with guys like us, we like to program as much volume as we can get away with, as close to the meet as we can get away with. When you're closer to meet, your total volume, you're usually pushing intensity more at that point anyway. So I find that it's just not quite as needed near a meet anyway for that reason. So after that, guys, the next thing is that we're gonna like drop the rep range, but add a tempo. So if you're dealing with a client where like maybe you're just dealing like with certain aches, whether it's in the elbows, the knees, whatever it may be, like for example on a squat, we can drop the rep range, so we're dropping the total workload they're doing, but by adding a tempo, we're still kind of stimulating the same amount of workload in a sense, because you're still almost keeping that exertion relative. Like even if I decrease the reps by say 3, but I add like a 2-1-2 tempo to that, then you're almost gonna feel like they're doing the same amount of work.
And then you also get the same load on the bar, and I think that's important. And this is something that we should say that's almost always on a secondary day.
Yeah.
You could do this on a primary day. I can't think of if I've done that except for deep in the off season.
Yeah.
But like say on our secondary squat day where we might do a set of 7 or something for just a lot of good volume.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll reduce that to a set of 4 or 5, but add in that 2-1-2 tempo or something. The load is going to be around the same, because even though it's lower rep, that tempo is going to make it a lot harder. So I like doing this for keeping the load the same, keeping the total workload the same, but because you're doing that tempo, it's just easier on the body a lot, and so you get like the same stimulus, but at the same time get to be a little bit healthier. This is something I'm doing with my high bar squats right now.
Yeah. Next point after that, guys, is simply, which goes back to like when we were talking about the tertiary day, just reduce total training days per week. This is something that Brendan was actually doing up until recently. He dropped a tertiary day just because, like you said, he's a broken old man. So it just doesn't make any sense.
And this doesn't have to be permanent.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's like that. I think people get in that mindset like, oh, if I go from squatting 3 times a week to 2 times a week, that's it forever. If you're simply too beat up to where you can't actually recover from it, because that's the thing. We want as much workload and volume as possible, but if you can't recover from it, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So pull back some of your training days. Go from 5 days a week to 4 days a week. In some cases, like very rarely, I've even had clients who go from 4 days a week to where we have to shift things to 3 days a week. It's just worth it, because you have to remember what powerlifting guys were thinking long term.
Yeah.
So
and it's one of those things too where more training days, whether it's upper body, lower body, doesn't matter. Some of those spots that get really fucking knotted up on you, for me it's my QL, and it's just to the point where you can't even deadlift or squat. Just having less total training days and more days where I have just complete rest really allows those like hot spots to release. And something you can even do is actually stack maybe an SBD day here and there, so you actually can keep frequency higher, but just less total days you're training. That seems to really help alleviate some of those injuries.
Absolutely.
Last thing was to say, reactive deloads. I have a video on this. Go watch the video about reactive deloads. We'll link that or something too. It's really like, I don't want to get too in depth here, but reactive deload is when instead of doing a planned deload, when shit just starts going wrong, you basically
you deload. And that's just simple auto regulation, guys, which is really what all our programming is based off of anyway when it comes down to it, or a lot of it.
I guess the last thing here.
I'll
start with this one. I really wanted to write this first dickhole because I hate when people look at all the fancy stuff to do first when they don't look at the basics. I don't mean to be rude. I'm just kind of joking around. But like, make sure you're sleeping 8 hours on average first.
Absolutely.
And make sure your micronutrition and calories, I should say even too, are in check before you go changing your program around all crazy or whatever. Now, if you're in grad school or some crap and you have a full-time job at the same time, you just can't sleep 8 hours, then okay, of course, go right here because you want to power lift. But if not, if you're just like sleeping at 6 to 7 hours a night because you're staying up on your phone, fix this first, because then all of a sudden you don't have to do all this and you get better results.
And just keep in mind, guys, the programming is set up a specific way for a reason. We don't want to have to adapt all this. This is like the worst case scenario. If you can fix everything outside the programming first, like your sleep, your nutrition, your general outside of the gym stress, do that first, because you're going to get far more benefit doing as much volume as you can, getting with as much intensity as you can.
We want to do more if we can.
That's
more stimulus.
Exactly.
Liam, my client Liam, I know he's probably watching this too. He texted me, he's feeling all fatigued and stuff, and we actually use these, we use the intensity tactics with him. But before we did anything, I literally told him to send me a full day of eating, what he eats on average, because me and him don't work together on nutrition, so I wasn't aware. And I asked him how much he was sleeping. His sleep was in check. His micronutrition was crap. We still ended up doing some of this, but I wanted to check this first, and we did. That way in the future, we can kind of push this a little bit more.
That's it, guys. That's really all it comes down to, guys. Like, cover the basics first. And if that's done, this is when you want to get into all of this. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you did. If you did not, leave a comment down below. Let me know what I or Brittany can do to get better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. We'll catch y'all later.